is a proposal to nature, which means that scientific statements are not facts, but they're about facts. So what I'd like to do here, I'd like to propose looking at challenges to America in the 21st century in 4 different ways. Obviously, these are not facts, they're proposals. So you can look at you can have a different story for the same event. Let me begin by making some presuppositions clear. It's well known that during the 16th to 18th century, that we call Age of Enlightenment, or Age of Reason, René Descartes set up this idea that the world can be known conceptually, and natural laws are static facts. The way Tarzan goes to jungle and discovers Jane or Sub or something, you go and discover laws. To that end, Isaac Newton interpreted physics like that his laws of motion, the 3 laws of motion, was something forever. And then John Locke brought in the idea of the sacredness of legislative power, and therefore divineness of property ownership, based on his presupposition about the social contract is only the purpose of government is to preserve private property. And then Adam Smith proffered that capitalism is a true state of nature forever, and the laissez-faire idea was promoted, and the don't tax the rich and trickle-down economy, that kind of presupposition. And then Montesquieu brought the separation of power, followed from Plato as the form of government. Now, in light of these background, the white European male, especially male, had this presupposition that they were chosen people to rule the world. You have slavery, you have colonialism, you have subjugation of women, and Chinese, the Opium War and so on. And so there was a presupposition before Hegel that nature is static, and Hegel changed this, that nature is to be viewed as a development from absolute, and then Marx in 19th century. Now, 20th century, we have a different problem, and it seems that the most salient features of 20th century is one, globalization, and the other one is the rise of China. And in light of these, in our discussion, we have conferences in China, Egypt, Russia, other places. I'd like to propose 4 topics that are important looking at the USA. First, I'd like to call it Obamization of demographical thing. By the year 2065, there's a projection that a majority of residents in the United States will not be ethnically from Western Europe. They'll be Hispanic, Africana, from Indian continents and other areas. So the kind of a European-dominated America will be changed to more of a rainbow person, and we have now judges from Hispanic background, and we have a black president, etc. At the same time, about 6 months ago, England gave up 1/3 of its army, military, and it put its aggressive, offensive force in cooperation with France. So I'd like to propose one has to look at how the Anglo-American dominance of Western bloc power will be changed, and how that would affect the global policy. It's interesting for you to think about. Secondly, there's no question that PRC, People's Republic of China, is growing intensely in terms of market. We have $1 trillion owns our wealth. And in the conferences that I've organized in the last 5 years in China every 2 years, it's astonishing when Western scholars and students see that Shanghai is 4 times as big as New York City in terms of building. Imagine you're standing in 6th Avenue, about 54th Street, 57th Street, where the big sky rises. Suppose that quadrupled in size and intensity, and that has a lot of effects. And Hong Kong twice as much. That it's not only economic, but the idea that technology and science doesn't belong necessarily to the white European American background. It's a psychological shock to some extent that is felt. And I think part of the objection to Obama, implicitly, as Carter pointed out, maybe also the non-white eroder. So this idea of China rising, in addition to economics, it has a psychological and self-reflective. And that's a challenge to the West. The third one, which may not be popular to the majority of this audience, but still, it's an interesting thing. There is no doubt that at least a majority of Muslim presuppose a conjecture that there is an agenda Islamic phobia from West toward them. And this encounter, maybe imaginary, maybe real, has many facets for us to study. One facet is that they all prediction conjecture the number of Muslims would increase to about 4 billion. Even in about 4 billion. Even in India, the rate of Islamic birth is more. China has at least 70 million Muslims, even its official number is 25. And based on many interpretations, such as the Unitarian perspective of a society, and the kind of guerrilla war or tribal mentality of cohesiveness, the present military superiority of the West is not going to, people conjecture, not going to subdue Islam. So if there are people who are, let's say, after Muslim or after that, that's not going to work. So there has to be another challenge with America is how to cope with this phenomena of Islam that it is confronting. So first, the Obamization, the demographic. Second, the fact of the China's growth. And the third, an unsuccessful attempt to kind of subdue Islam and bring people in whose number of Muslim majority into in line with that. The fourth and the most problematic is internal. The economic crisis of 2009, as Obama and even Karimov, president of Uzbekistan, said, it shows the death of supply-side economy. So the capitalism in terms of John Locke, Adam Smith laissez-faire is no longer feasible. As a matter of fact, Obama had this choice when General Motors was going to be bankrupt. According to capitalism, he should let it fall apart. imagine, he conjectured, the housing problem is very bad. Incidentally, there'd be probably 3.5 more million houses within 2 years foreclosed. And the banking mess. So to let General Motors off, you have about 400,000 workers and another 400 by subsidiaries. It'd be a really, recession. In that sense, so Obama overcame this idea of capitalistic competition, and he introduced. So we have moved now from capitalism into a more of a regulated type of economy, and a group of us have started to put a collaboration between the post-Deng Xiaoping Marxism of kind of partially state-controlled, partially market economy, and post-Obama capitalism. See, we can have a middle language that maps the capitalistic of that type, and we have a pragmatic model for that and concept. And on March 28th, there'll be a conference here of, there'll be 11 economists who come from China for this meeting alone. You're all invited to that. Now, another conjecture, or something we should examine, is it possible for American economic to survive if there's no war? That is, to what extent our economic is based on war economy? To what extent? America has about 45% of the manufacturing weapons of mass destruction. France and England have about 4.5%. Germany has 3%. And the rest of the world has the rest of it. Now, like, you can, if Iraq troops leave Afghanistan, the war expenditure, as Eisenhower said, military-industrial complex. So I think one recommendation I'd like to make, we published a book called Ecopiety. It's written by a Korean professor who will be here in March. And he believes that there is a presupposition of growth on top of the Western thought. Even John Dewey, for example, think that the growth, and this is possible when you have open spaces, like the West was open. And even now, China in the year 2009, they lost about $190 billion that they could export. What they did, they spent $600 billion industrializing the center of China, which is not like the coast. And they got about 150 billion products. And China is developing that. And when that's finished, probably their plan in sustainability for Africa will work, or they have to go to Central Asia. So he thinks that the notion of growth is not healthy as an ideal, especially for depletion of non-natural resources. He recommends what is called sustainability. That you look at, like, one of my obsession is to get neckties, buy more neckties. And my wife and friends attack me, justifiably, by the way. And what are you going to do? If you wear one of them for the rest of your life, it'll be too many. Why are you buying more? Especially when you borrow from us and not pay back. So, the idea of sustainability, and he thinks that Taoism, Confucianism, and Chen Buddhism teach the idea of sustainability, especially when you get older. one contains the number of things one acquires, or number of people you know, or caught on your activity. So the idea to teach that the sustainability is the model rather than growth is something that we should adopt. The second one he recommends, and he'll be here on March 28th to talk to you, that he called transversality. Transversality means that when you deal with another person, you should attempt to look at another person's perspective. Like, we think if somebody is not dressed like a Westerner, the person's not dressed properly, or something, feeling is kind of strange, And I know all people who've been married or who have close friends, children or parents, they know that ultimately you don't think of Eve as coming out of my womb. You think of Eve as something on her own, who talks to the snake and eats the fruit and tells you what to do, especially when you're kicked out of heaven. That your spouse, or friend, or colleague, or students are themselves individual entities, unique, and you have to put themselves in their particular perspective.
When you say sustainability, you are saying
and
sustainability of growth, or?
No, first would be sustainability that Dr. Howe teaches, in which that you have to think of, for example, how many saris can you wear? See what I mean? You think, well, I have 34, I'm gonna stop that, or buy only 4 more a year. That you cannot sustain, that you just grow.
So sustained growth, steady growth. So.
Yes, and also you can think like people start having children and they say, well, after 2 or 3, or they have diverse field and they sustain, especially non-renewable natural resources. And when you're, like the West has been exhausted technologically, that transversality is something else. Transversality is that you look at the world not only from a, let's say, male perspective or Eurocentric perspective, you look at the world in the other perspective. When you meet somebody, of course, when you're a mother, you naturally do that. You know what I mean? When you love somebody, you put your child, or even when you love your students or colleague, you do the same thing. You think of them as the center. So he recommends these two. So basically speaking, I know time is short. Well, I'd like to introduce you to a story, which is not a fact, but is a proposal that the problems that will face the United States, or is facing, one is accepting Supreme Court members who are women and are not necessarily from Anglo-Saxon background, accepting the fact that China's economic growth is something very substantial and we have to adjust to it, accepting the possibility that one cannot subdue Islam in a long run, and military occupation and these things are not going to work, and also reflecting to what extent our own economic presupposition, capitalism, for example, is sustainable, and also to what extent we can live without being dependent on war, military expenditure. I recommend that these are some of the things we should reflect as Americans. We like to this country sustainable and lasting. So that's all I wanted to say.
Are you inviting any paper on this subject, or you are already having?
No, you're most. My email is done. We publish, we have an organization organization, global scholar publication. We publish about 500, 600 books. Some are by Oxford University, sponsored, and others. And we have many conferences all over the world in the summer and in the winter. We have here one conference on March and the same one at the UN. But you're most welcome to email me, and I'll be very, very happy to have the grace of your presence in the meeting. It will have to be